Well, I hope they keep thinking about it because they're going to get beaten so badly. Do you know, ICE, these are the guys that go in and take MS-13 and they take them out because they're much tougher than MS-13, like by a factor of 10. And these are the ones, you get rid of ICE, you're going to have a country that you're going to be afraid to walk out of your house. I love that issue if they're going to actually do that.
The Abolish ICE movement is picking up steam after rising political star Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won the Democratic primary against longtime New York Congressman Joseph Crowley, with abolishing ICE as a key part of her platform. Now, other top Democratic leaders are supporting the idea.
And I think there's no question that we've got to critically re-examine ICE and its role and the way that it is being administered and the work it is doing. And we need to probably think about starting from scratch. I don't think that the government should be in the position of separating families. And that is clearly what is part of what's happening at ICE and DHS.
Joining me now is Tiffany Cross, co-founder and managing editor at The Beat DC. And back with me to discuss is Maria Hinojosa, Representative Pramila Jayapal, and Jason Johnson. Thank you all for being here. So, Tiffany, you are new to the table, so I'm going to come to you on this first. In addition to who we just saw, Kamala Harris, being very critical of ICE, those Democrats who've actually come out to abolish the agency are the aforementioned Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who will be the next Congresswoman from New York's 14th District, Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator from New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, Representative Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, and Elizabeth Warren. It's a pretty short read because there aren't a lot of Democrats calling for it. Right. What do you make of this sort of mini?
Well, there may not be a lot of Democrats calling for the abolishment of ICE, but certainly Democrats have been out front with calling for more accountability. Kamala Harris was joined by Senator Mazie Hirono and Bob Menendez of saying you all have been reckless with your immigration policy. So they've tried to pull funding from them. In Philadelphia, which ranks number 16 in the country of undocumented immigrant population, the field office ICE there has been #1 in arresting undocumented immigrants with no prior criminal history. And so the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Chair, Michelle Lujan Grisham, has been very out front on that issue and called for some oversight there. So there's been a long history of Democrats trying to fight this. But again, they're in a Republican-controlled Congress, so it's not much they can do. They don't have a lot of leverage. But I do think that, you know, you do have to look at how ICE was born. It was birthed out of 9/11. Right. And so there was a lot of fear at that time. And at that time, there was overwhelming support for the Patriot Act by Republicans and Democrats. And so you had people very willing to give up their rights. You know, that allowed for FBI to search your emails and financial records with no court order. Law enforcement could go into your house and not let the occupants know. And both sides of the aisle championed this law. And so here we are stuck with it. And what it did, the Patriot Act authorized as well, the indefinite detention of immigrants. And so here we are, more than a decade later, still grappling with those issues. And so I think the Democrats have a tough hill to climb to actually abolish the agency. You could also make the argument that this is, immigration is an economic issue. So the fact that when the Department of Homeland Security came about and ICE came about, that it was put in the national security sector, that really goes to show how easily people in this country can be swayed to believe that people who don't look and live exactly like you are the enemy.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, Maria, that is one of the issues, is that Donald Trump talks about ICE as if it was born with the country, right? As if George Washington created it, rather than it being created, as Tiffany said, in 2003. It was a child response to 9/11. So that's one thing. It's not an old agency. It's only been around for 15 years. It also has a long record of abusing detainees through both the Bush and Obama administrations, and now in the era of Trump, it seems alarmingly unfettered. There have been horror stories. The ACLU, if you go to their website, has a sort of warning up about ICE, saying in recent years, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE has detained and deported record numbers of people from the United States. Many of ICE's removal tactics take away even the right to a fair hearing in court as the government rushes to judgment and tries to ram people through a rubber stamp system that ignores individual circumstances. So it's not exactly a sacrosanct agency.
No, and as you know, Joy, I've been reporting about this for a long time, the problems that ICE has and the fact that there is no oversight. But I got to tell you, so, you know, I have the radio on in my house all the time, and I'm always flipping stations. And today I happened to end up on a popular culture, black radio, like urban, soul. It was, you know, 6:30 in the morning. But you know what they were talking about? And they said something like, you know, we are 15 million listeners in the New York area. They were talking about ICE. They were talking about incarceration. They were making that connection. And I actually thought, well, you know something interesting? We have people now saying abolish ICE. And we also have, thanks to Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump, what was a secret, detention camps in your community, they've made that public now. So with all of this horror, what they have actually done is they have taken the veil off of these places, and people are now seeing with their own eyes. The question is what happens after this moment. You know, children and parents have been ripped apart. It's not a separation, it's actually a destruction of a family, and that's been happening for a long time. The protests are relatively new, and there are many, many, many children besides these 2,000, etc., that are looking to be reunited. It's we're talking about tens of thousands of children, who are missing their parents.
Yeah, absolutely. And meanwhile, Jason, you're seeing Trump talk about ICE in ways that communities of color are accustomed to hearing him and other people in his ideological group talk about law enforcement versus the people that they police. This is Donald Trump Wednesday in South Carolina talking about what he is interpreting to his audience as the dangers that ICE is keeping them from.
The Democrats want open borders. They want anybody they want, including MS-13, pouring into the country. And the Democrats don't like ICE. They want to protect illegals coming into the country, much more so than they want to protect you. And that's not where we're coming from.
Just a note to the viewers, MS-13 came from Los Angeles. They'd be pouring in to the country from the country. But let's go to you, Jason.
Yeah. So this is the ugly path we're on here. And I think we always need to understand where the Republicans and where this white nationalist administration is going from. Last fall in October, ICE asked the DOJ, can we start eliminating our own records, right? So now ICE has the ability to destroy their own documentation of abuse and violence and everything else like that. That was approved. We can't even go back and see what this agency is doing. You also have an administration that has bolstered ICE and made it one of the largest agencies in the government. They've got more ICE agents than FBI agents at this particular point in some particular areas of the country. You also have an administration that said the next goal, Jeff Sessions said this, is to go after naturalized citizens who may have filled out their applications wrong and kick them out of the country. I don't trust an administration led by a man who lied to us for 8 years saying he thinks Barack Obama's from another country. If you don't think that ICE can start getting sicked on American citizens who are under question as to whether or not they're citizens, you're not paying attention to what's been happening for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
This is a dangerous agency, and it needs to be stopped.
Especially since they're also talking about something called denaturalization, meaning people who've already been naturalized, then being reinvestigated as to whether, in their view, it was fraudulent for them to get their citizenship in the first place. I want to play the acting director of ICE, whose name is Thomas Homan. He went on, of course, Fox on Friday to defend the agency. Take a listen.
I'm leaving in the middle of a fight. I'm insulted at a lot of the Democratic senators and congressmen that want to vilify the men and women that put their lives on the line every day for this country. And they're going to abolish ICE for things ICE isn't even doing. They're going to abolish ICE for enforcing the laws that they enacted.
Congresswoman, your response?
Well, my response is that I agree with Maria earlier when she said we have been trying to bring these issues up for a very long time. I was on the outside until I was elected in 2016. And in 2008, we did a report on human rights abuses within the, at that time, Tacoma Detention Center just south of my district. And I think that this, the silver lining here is that it is an opportunity to pull that veil back and to show people what is happening. I said several weeks ago that ICE has to go because it isn't about the enforcement functions going. We always have to have immigration enforcement functions. It's about the agency that has gone rogue. And this agency, let's make no mistake about it, has gone rogue. We spend hundreds of millions of federal taxpayer dollars on an agency that then contracts out to private for-profit prisons in order to hold immigrants who are being detained. And it's sort of this combination of the rise in criminalization, at the same time that we've seen sort of a growing movement to decriminalize in the criminal justice system, at least, which has taken many steps back since Sessions came in as Attorney General. But before that, we were starting to see that. At the same time, we've seen a rise in the criminalization of immigrants specifically for two things. One, what's called illegal entry, and the other for what's called illegal reentry. We had a hearing the other day on the need for more federal judges. The reason that we need more federal judges is because over half of what federal judges now do is listen to these prosecutions on those two simple things. who have not committed any crimes. Now, with the addition of prosecutions for people seeking asylum, this is an agency that is completely rogue, no accountability to Congress, no ability. We do have some standards in place, not nearly enough. And so last year, I introduced a bill that is called Dignity for Detained Immigrants, and it actually completely reforms the detention system. And this is part and parcel of what we have to do as we get rid of ICE, and we actually think about what are the functions we need, how do we decriminalize immigrants, and how do we make sure that federal dollars are going to what we need. I can tell you a lot of my colleagues on the Democratic side had no idea, really, of everything that was happening. And now, as they're going to these detention centers, these facilities that are contracted out by ICE and CBP, they're seeing what's actually happening with our federal dollars. One more thing I got to say. It isn't just Democrats that are calling for this. 19 ICE enforcement agents wrote a letter recently, I just posted it on my Twitter account, that said that they are deeply concerned, for example, about this zero tolerance policy because it's taking necessary resources away from things they should be doing. And so as we recraft these enforcement functions, what we need to think about is where are the most serious threats? And immigration, unfortunately, has always been sort of fact against myth. It has been used as a political football. That's what Donald Trump is trying to do, is scare people into thinking that immigrants are the cause of all crimes in this country, all of the unemployment in this country. None of those things are actually true. Yeah. So let's focus on what exactly it is we want ICE to do as we enforce our immigration laws. But equally important, let's look at comprehensive immigration reform, because if we did that, we wouldn't actually have to enforce all of these laws.
We wouldn't have this issue. I mean, when we were down in Tornillo, the journalist that went and toured that facility asked, of the 320-something young people, kids, children who were there, how many had been found to have any sort of gang affiliation. The answer was 0.
Yeah.
None. Right. Thank you, Maria Hinojosa. Thank you, Congressman Pramila Jayapal. Tiffany Cross and Jason Johnson will join us in our next hour. And up next, Donald Trump's got a big